So I said this afternoon that I'd talk about the conclusion to my book. The book's called Delivering the Impossible, and I'm trying to wrap it up with a conclusion. And yesterday, one of the chapters, I'm going to jump around a bit because that's the joy of rambling while you're walking the streets. One of the chapters in my book is a kind of abstract, more philosophical, people will say, chapter, which is about two different ways of seeing the world. Same, all, and forever, and exact matching is one way of seeing the world. And then another way of seeing the world is different, some, and for a short space of time, and approximate matching. And I've been struggling a bit, the last three chapters of my book are this chapter talking about some and all, and same and different, and approximate matching and exact matching. And then another one of the last three chapters is about commitment and consistency. And I kind of realised very late that this chapter, the sum versus all, same versus different, forever versus a short space of time, exact matching versus not exact matching, really explains what the problem is with commitment and consistency. I've been kind of struggling, really kind of getting that out, winkling that out, perhaps because they come in a different order. But also, I had an idea yesterday. I was reading a book on Gödel's incompleteness theorem, which I'm probably never really going to understand. But there was a word in there that I kind of found really useful, which is kind of like a slightly odd word, but I think there's kind of a more everyday word that we can use instead, which kind of means the same thing, which really kind of, for me, clarifies what is going on with project management, why people get themselves into such tangle over it, and how you actually might get yourself out of that tangle. So, and the word is substrate, but I think, which means the thing that you build everything on, and the substrate, foundation maybe is the one word, but I'm kind of going to go with something a lot simpler than either even foundation, and say stuff. And so the kind of the confusion that people often get into, and this is kind of what I talk about it in the commitment and consistency chapter. The confusion that people get into is they want to see an exact match between two entirely different kinds of stuff. So software is working software. This is the other thing I'm going to drag in here, which is the Agile Manifesto, at least one part of it. Working software is an entirely different kind of thing from documentation. I'm not sure what the adjective is they use. Careful documentation, detailed documentation, something like that. It's a different kind of stuff. And different kinds of stuff have different kinds of rules. And so a lot of the problems that we encounter with working software are to do with the fact that working software gets bugs, or working software needs servers, or working software runs at a certain speed when it's provided with certain amounts of hardware. All of those working software sits on a stack of other software. All of it needs updating, all those kinds of things. These are kind of the things that, that I'm thinking about Shakespeare now, that the things that flesh is heir to, the things that code is heir to, working software is all those kinds of vagaries. And documentation has its own problems, but documentation's problems aren't those problems. They're different kinds of things. And so what the Agile Manifesto says is focus more than you have been on the working software, and don't focus so much on the documentation. And this is something that it's really kind of maybe really straightforwardly explained by saying, why should you do that? Because these things are different kinds of stuff. And one of the things that I talk about in the chapter where I talk about some, all, same, different, for a short space of time, forever, an exact match, an inexact match, is I talk about biscuit tins and biscuits, and say, gosh, so much of the grief is comes from the fact that people imagine that there can be an exact match between the description of a biscuit on a biscuit tin and the biscuit. And also they kind of forget that the value is in the biscuit. The biscuit's the thing that actually has nutrition. And again, like kind of, the stuff that biscuits are made of has its own vagaries. Kind of like things go stale, ingredients aren't kind of like as reliable as they should be. Ovens are different. People are allergic to it, certain ingredients, so they could kill them. Those are vagaries of actual biscuits. Those are problems with biscuits. And then descriptions of biscuits have other problems. One of the problems with description of biscuit is that it can be impossible. You can talk about a low-calorie, low-fat biscuit that tastes nice. It's probably impossible. Getting too kind of hung up on a perfect exact match between the description of the biscuit and the biscuit isn't probably where you need to focus most of your energy, because the place to focus your energy is on getting a good biscuit. Admittedly, some aspects of the description might be important, that this is nut free or gluten free, or if it says it's a chocolate biscuit and it isn't, people aren't going to be happy. So it's not, there's no relation between the two, but focusing on absolutely getting the exact match is not the recipe for success. And why would we do this? Why would we get stuck in focusing on stuff that isn't the stuff that we're supposed to produce? So why would we get stuck on producing documentation and specifications rather than code? Why would we get stuck on producing descriptions of biscuits rather than biscuits? And that's something I talk about in this chapter, the chapter all, chapter some, is that I talk about the fact that the unconscious mind is kind of very tempted by, what stuff is the mind made of? The mind is made of mental stuff, and that's things like descriptions. The mind isn't made of code, and the mind isn't made of biscuits, but the mind can generate things like descriptions of code and descriptions of biscuits. And so obviously it's more comfortable with that than it is with the actual stuff that we need to produce. There's some other stuff as well in this kind of theory that says, basically the unconscious mind is much more comfortable with all and same and forever than it is with some and different and for a short space of time. But that's the thing, is like some and different for a short space of time, or in time, temporally, don't know what that word is, in time. Those things that we talk about, biscuits and software, they're definitely in those things. You have some biscuits, you have some code that does some things. The biscuits can go off, the biscuits can be underdone, code can be too slow, it can take too long. So those kinds of things those are the stuff that we need to be concentrating on more when we're trying to make our project succeed.